Hey, what's going on, everybody? In this video, we're going to be doing a book review of an excellent history book over World War One, and it is A World Undone, The Story of the Great War 1914 to 1918 by G.J. Meyer. And I have to say, this is probably the best single-volume history of World War One that I've read so far, and I encourage you guys to check it out even before you finish watching the review. Alright, now, to start off with just a couple little nitpicky things, which some of them really aren't even the book's fault. To try and fit every single facet of World War One into a single volume book, even if it is a big book like this, is probably impossible. So really, the authors always have to kind of cut things out, especially if it's something as broad as a topic as World War One, just to fit it in a single volume. But for example, some of the stuff I think he could have tried to fit in a little bit more maybe was some of the evolution of technology that was employed during World War One. He does cover a lot of things such as the evolution of like the Maxim machine guns and artillery and barbed wire and that sort of thing. I felt maybe airplanes and submarine warfare could have been expounded on a little bit more, though I guess in his defense, airplanes really weren't too much of a factor. Submarines, he does cover more broadly because of the when like Kaiser Wilhelm does the open submarine warfare, where pretty much any ship in the Atlantic is fair game for German U-boats to sink. He does cover that a little bit more. But anyways, I just felt like some things could have been looked into a little bit further. But for the most part, he does cover what needs to be covered. Also, some of the theaters of war, like for example, a few things that happened in Africa weren't mentioned like at all. But to be honest, I haven't read a book where the African campaigns are mentioned more than just in passing. To be fair, probably that's not the main theater of war, I should say. Not that it's not important, but the numbers involved and the resources dedicated to the minor African campaigns, they are more or less skirmishes compared to the Western and Eastern theaters. He does cover the Middle East a little bit, though I thought more could be. That was probably the weakest theater of war that he does cover at all. He does cover Lawrence of Arabia a little bit in the uprisings against the Ottomans, but it's mentioned towards the end and kind of more of an afterthought. But he does cover the Western Front really well, and he covers the Eastern Front, and not just the Eastern Front regarding Germany and Russia. He does cover the campaigns in, for example, like Romania, which a lot of times are skipped over as well. But he does cover the Eastern Front really well, so that was really good too. Now to the positives, which there are a lot in this book. To start with, it's not just a military history. He covers the beginning, the setup towards the war, which is a very popular topic with World War One, just because of the political dynamic between the alliances and that sort of thing that led to basically an all-out world war. He does cover that, and really, I felt he covered that really well. He dedicates quite a bit of the book to it, but it's definitely important to understand how World War One got going and why it didn't end as fast as previous wars, and what everyone kind of expected was going to happen. One interesting thing about this book that I thought was really well done is every time he has a chapter, or most times he has a chapter, he also has like a kind of like a mini chapter that he labels background and then a certain topic. And what he does is with these background sections is he covers a topic that's important to know about World War One and understand it fully, but it usually isn't covered as much. For example, he does like a background section on the Junkers, which were like the Prussian aristocracy that were basically an elite class in the German Empire, and how they influenced like military policy and had a lot of standing in Germany's government and that sort of thing. Some of the other chapters were like on the home fronts. Let me just flip through real fast to make sure I cover some of the ones that I'm just doing a blank on. But yeah, he covers history of like the Habsburgs and the Serbs, and the Romanov dynasty, and then the Ottomans. He does like the French commanders and like profiles of the French commanders, profiles of the British commanders, He does have one like on submarine warfare. Let's see, like the Armenian genocide. That's usually kind of skipped over a lot of times, as well as like for example in the Russian stuff he does like the Cossacks and the Romanovs. Just he does cover a lot of things, and even some cultural stuff, like I said, like the home front, but also like war poetry, which is a huge thing on both sides of World War One. He covers these things. These background sections were almost, I think, probably my favorite part of the book. It was just interesting to see these in-depth little vignettes on really specific topics that usually kind of just get mentioned briefly in other history works. But he does also, in the main narrative of the book, cover the political and military situation of World War One in really great detail. Like sometimes he does even do really in-depth tactical, like a tactical overview of important battles, as well as some battles that aren't as well known, which I thought was really good. It did turn out to be a really big book, but it was not. There was no real dry parts, and there was no real tough slogs to go through. It was thoroughly, excuse me, it was thoroughly readable, and I enjoyed it a ton. I also thought that the author, J.J. Meyer, did a really good job giving both sides and most of the countries involved a fair shake, and portrays them. He doesn't portray any of them as only good or only evil, and shows how basically each each country had its good and bad aims basically that it was going for, and he gives most of the main players pretty much equal treatment, both like I said in characterizing them as well as in how much narrative he dedicates to them. Obviously, Britain, Germany, France, and the Austro-Hungarians and the Russians take up the majority, but also the Ottomans take up some. The Americans, once they're involved, are have a couple chapters dedicated to them, as well as Italy. So he does cover all the major players, and pretty much, like I said, gives everyone a fair shake. But overall, I'm giving this book a solid 5 out of 5 stars. If you're interested in military history, especially World War One or even World War Two, to show the setup for World War Two, basically, you should definitely check this book out. Like I said, I feel this is probably the best one-volume history of World War One probably out there. Hopefully, I guess it set the bar really high, and now I'm probably gonna stack any other books I read on World War One against it. So it's a great standard to have, and like I said, 5 out of 5 stars to A World Undone, with the story of the Great War. And remember, read victoriously.